Greetings everyone and welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes here on the Green Art channel. If you are interested in content like this, please hit the subscribe. Let me know you're out there so you don't miss any of the good videos that come out every week. And with that, let's get started on this week's topic. I'm super excited to talk about this one. Working with agricultural deities in modern plant spirit work, or even just as a modern pagan sort, a modern person who practices an earth and nature-centered type of spirituality. This is a very interesting topic because we don't see a lot of agricultural deities getting pulled into a lot of our modern practices. And I think the reason for that is the obvious one, that not very many of us are dependent directly on what grows in our gardens, what grows in our fields to survive, right? We have the luxury of grocery stores. We have the luxury of preserved and canned foods that allow us to survive the winter without much fear. And most of us don't go through the day, worrying too much about famine on a great scale. I think a lot of us worry about financial troubles for sure, but those bigger concepts of, will the earth continue to provide for us? I think a lot of us modern folk are pretty divorced from those concepts. So it's no surprise that agricultural deities don't show up very much in modern practice, but I would still like to talk about them because there is space for them. And when we call them in to our deeper plant spirit work, our green sorceries, I find that they are incredibly responsive and really a great pleasure to work with. So what are agricultural deities as far as a really broad category? They are the deities, the spirits who have influence and personal interest over the farming, the gardening, the abundance of the land, the production of crops, and the cycles of vegetation. So these are deities, gods and goddesses who part of what they're thinking about, part of where their own area of influence extends is into the way that plants grow. Now, these are not deities necessarily of the wild. They're not Pan, right? They're not deities who we would think about the deep forest or untamed, wild, mysterious spaces. No, they are deities of agriculture. What's the difference? Agriculture specifically is what happens when the plant person and the human person work in relationship. Agriculture is the sowing of seeds by human hand. It is the tilling of soil by human effort. It is the stewardship of plants and crops by the human heart, right? So agriculture is what happens when we as humans work or dovetail with the plant spirits in an intentional way. So we're not dealing with often primordial deities here, the ones of the wild. We're dealing with deities who understand the human plight. They understand that we have to eat. We have to grow crops in order to survive. And so these deities get wrapped up not only into the production of food crop, but also concepts of plenty and enoughness and abundance and wealth, because at its core, abundance is about, how much can be produced, how okay are we, how much plenty is there. So these agricultural deities represent a synthesis between the plant spirit and the human spirit, between the gifts of the green realm and human ingenuity. If we think about the way that agriculture has evolved, both good ways and terrible ways, over the ages, most of that is human concept, right? How we've worked with machinery and plows and pesticides and chemicals and soil treatment and all the really good stuff that we've done too, like biodynamic farming and soil rebuilding and a new interest in mycology and all of these things. So these are interesting deities because they talk about the way that plants and humans can work together to make sure that everybody's okay. So they're often involved in earth mythology, right? That when we see earth goddesses, land goddesses. Oftentimes either there's crossover, or we see that that earth goddess has a son who is an agricultural god, or a daughter who is an agricultural goddess, right? Because agricultural deities will by nature need to have a direct relationship with the earth, which is the source of food crop provenance. So there's always connection to these very earthy deities, which most of the folks who do this kind of work, myself included, really appreciate. Like, we like that energy and we like those personalities. So they are connected to the earth, often involved with the earth mother, with earth cults. We'll see that time and time again with the deities that we talk about today. They are ultimately responsible for the production of food crops and avoidance of famine, right? And in other words, like we mentioned earlier, abundance. That we're not always just approaching agricultural deities through a context of food, but through this bigger context of people having enough, communities having enough, of the ethics too, in my opinion, if we go deeper into agricultural mythos, the ethics of the human person being in right relationship with the land to the point where the land is always willing to give enough, right? And so there is an ethical implication here. There's a sacred reciprocity invitation here. There's sacred relationship, that the concepts of real abundance, of real enoughness, have everything to do with the way that we relate to the sources of our fundamental abundance, which is the land, always. So this is always an invite for us to work on those relationships, to clean them up a little bit, to do whatever we can, whether that's in a garden bed or a field or a pot on our porch, wherever our influence extends. We have there some responsibility, some opportunity to be good stewards. So there's often, with some of these deities, an older connection, not always to wildness, but maybe to ancient trees that have a lot of myth and legend around them, to places where the cultivated parts of the land butt up against the wild parts of the land, where order and chaos touch, these liminal spaces, these hedgerows. When we go deeper into the further back tales of these different deities. And when we go even further back, most of them are related to plant spirit medicine, plant work, green mysteries, plant sorcery. All of them have sacred plants. This is one thing that we see over and over again. I'm going to give you a big list of deities, and you will see these deities, with just cursory research, all have connections to sacred plants. A tree that's considered their tree, or an herb that's considered sacred to them, meaning that's a plant that they're in relationship with, that maybe they work through that plant or that tree in connecting with their devotees or their communities. So we don't have to go back very far from these, controlled agricultural deities to see the way that they're actually rooted in plant spirit work and the cycles of plant spirits. And of course, I find that very, very interesting and inspiring. Their connection to specific plants and specific trees often makes up a big part of their cult, right? How their devotees work with them. There's often a plant spirit that acts as an intercessor or a mediator between the human person, the human devotee, and the god themselves. So this is very interesting. So with that understanding of what is an agricultural deity, what is agriculture as a meeting point between human and plant, and what does plant cult look like when it revolves around a deity who is over agricultural cycles of plant cycles, how can we put this to work in our modern practice? Where is there room for us to dig in? Pun intended. First, they all have connections to plants. So if you're interested in plants, there are deities, I guarantee, from whatever cultural or ethnic tradition that you might be part of, there are deities, there are gods and goddesses who are connected also to plants. And they can be really fantastic allies to work on a relationship with, to help you deepen your own relationship to the plants, because as protectors and influencers of the plant cycles, they know the mysteries that you are seeking, right? So this is part of how the cults of these different deities develop, is that people understand, oh, this goddess is over the flowers, and I want to understand the mysteries of flowers, the magic, the medicine, what's held there. So I'm going to relate to her as teacher, as patroness, right? This is how some of these cults develop. And so it's very interesting. They are also connected to the deep medicine, the deep magic of plant cycles. When seeds wake up, when the spring comes, how that verdant force comes up from the land, when the plants flower, when they fruit, when is it harvest time, how do the plants rest over the winter. A lot of these deities have mythos that relates to the seasons, that relates to the cycles, specifically how they influence the plants, or how the plants express the seasons. We see this over and over again. I think about the classic agricultural mythos of Persephone and Demeter, of course, that when Persephone is with her mother Demeter, the world is in growth phase, in abundance phase. When she is away from her mother is sad, and the earth goes into rest and harvest phase, right? So these are deities that hold those mysteries for us. So getting close to them gives us access, special access to these deeper plant spirit mysteries. Sometimes these deities will connect to a particular plant or group of plants or plant spirit as part of their cult. So if you have a particular fascination with the pine trees, right? There are deities like Attis who have a deep connection with the pine tree spirit in their cult. And so by working with Attis, you're also working with pine, sort of as a triad of sorcery. So you can think about it that way as well. And the last thing, which maybe is the most important, is that these deities, these gods and goddesses, are the ones that have the ability to give us deeper plant spirit initiations. They're the ones that, because they know all the plant spirits, by connecting to them, we're kind of plugging into a hub of wisdom, a hub of power. And they are then able to give us inspiration and insight into which plants we might want to ally ourselves to, which plants we might want to work with. In other words, they can gift us with plant spirit familiars. When we look at traditional British witchcraft, for example, we see that it is the witch's god who often gifts the devotee with their animal familiar. And we also see in plant spirit work that it tends to be these agricultural deities who gift those of us on a plant spirit path with our plant spirit familiars. So, see interesting connotations. So with that, let's look at just a few examples of agricultural deities, mostly from that big, broad Indo-European world. This list is by no means exhaustive, and scholars probably could argue a couple of them, but they're ones that I personally consider wrapped up in agriculture and appropriate deities for those of us working plant spirit mysteries to research, to investigate, to connect with, to meditate on, and see if there's any potential of connection there. So the first I think about is the Irish Dagda or Deities. I think about the Greek Demeter, the mother, right? Not only an earth goddess type, but a deity directly related to the production of food crops and cereal grains, as is the Greek Ceres, from whose name we literally get the word cereal or food grain, right? So there's an interesting connection there. I think about the Anglo-Saxon Ingfreyr and his Norse counterpart Freyr of the Vanir tribe, being deeply a deity of fertility and plant mysteries and all things of the green realm. The Egyptian Osiris, his entire life mythos and the way that he relates to Isis and Horus is all a reference to agricultural cycles in the specific climate of Egypt. It is a fantastic mythos to explore for inspiration, or if that's a particular tradition you're connected to, working with him absolutely gives a deep access to the green mysteries. The Greek Persephone, of course, daughter of Demeter. That myth of Persephone and Demeter and her descent into hell is enough fuel for plant spirit work to keep you busy for endless lifetimes. So if you haven't gotten into that yet, I highly suggest you do so. The Mesopotamian Tammuz, also a really beautiful mythos and cultus around that deity related to agricultural cycles. We have the Slavic Veles, also agricultural cycles, very related to the seasons, the rain, the fertility of crops. And last but not least, the Greek Aphrodite. I love to talk about her because it ruffles so many people's feathers. Aphrodite is the goddess of love. We've pigeonholed her. We've put her into a box. But when we look at the deep mythos of who Aphrodite is as a person and how she likes to be related to, she is fundamentally a goddess of walled gardens, of spaces where the human creative spirit combines with the plant power to create beauty, to create harmony. So Aphrodite, as goddess of walled gardens, of plants and flowers, continues to be an inspiration for folks on the plant spirit path. She brings a deeper initiation into the green mysteries than I think most people realize she is interested in or capable of. And that is a huge disservice to the person of Aphrodite. When you look at her relationship to older goddesses from other traditions, the green mysterious parts of her personality quickly sprout to the surface, and you see what a fantastic ally she can be on this path. So just a few off the top of my head there, a few deities that you can research and consider, all very interesting ways to bring more wisdom and inspiration and initiation into our plant spirit work. If there are deities from this list or others that you work with as part of working a plant spirit path, a part of being a plant person, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. If this is content that interests you, consider joining us over on Patreon, where we do monthly plant spirit journeys, advanced classes, courses, all kinds of good stuff. And I look forward to seeing you next week.